Most professionals think that sarcasm is harmless. A little wit to show that you're in on the joke, especially in the workplace. And the Western culture, especially Anglophone, has really come to believe that sarcasm is a normal part of conversation. And immigrants into that culture have the pressure, and they think that they need to develop sarcasm in their language in order to be properly assimilated. On a large part, sarcasm has been culturally normalized for its utility. On one hand, it lets you express your criticism without taking responsibility for criticism. And it allows you to protect yourself from vulnerability by staying one step removed from sincerity. And it also lets you express your frustrations while you can appear to be joking. Using sarcasm in casual social settings is one thing, but using it in business and leadership settings is another. In business and leadership settings, sarcasm is rarely heard as intelligence. In fact, to senior leaders and decision-making executives, presenting sarcasm can be heard and can be seen as contempt or even powerlessness. For example, many professionals use a specific form of workplace humor, the cynical, sarcastic coping mechanism, and it allows you to vent your frustrations without taking responsibility of direct confrontation. But here's the thing, language is thought. So if your language, if your words are indirect, if they're passive, and if they're cynical, then your thinking will be perceived to be passive, indirect, and cynical. Today, I'm going to discuss the linguistics of authority. And specifically, I'm going to be auditing some common phrases to break down the raw psychological data that you're actually feeding to your peers and your supervisors. Let's get started. The first common phrase is living the dream. Someone comes up to you and asks how you are, and you smile and you say, "Oh, you know, living the dream." And when you're saying it, you think that you are expressing camaraderie in suffering. But what it really communicates is that you are trapped in a situation that you despise, and you don't have the courage to leave it, or you don't have the power to improve it. Now, if you don't despise it, at least it portrays that you don't enjoy it and that this is not something that aligns with who you are, and you're definitely not passionate about what you're doing. And so then what you're positioning yourself as is kind of like a martyr. Why are you there then martyring yourself, right? Because it denotes, instead of camaraderie and suffering, it communicates that you are in a current situation that is disempowered. You're in a current situation, you're trapped in this situation that you don't like. And the thing is, leaders don't promote martyrs. So then if you're positioning yourself that way, without intent, remember, sarcasm, expressing humor, sometimes you don't intend to do things, you don't intend to have that meaning, but I'm talking about perception. Your words create perceptions, and perceptions of how you're thinking, perceptions of how you're being. And what it portrays here, the perception, is that you're in an environment, you're trapped in an environment that you have not yet mastered. And if you haven't mastered it, you're martyring yourself because you despise it, then it's very difficult to position yourself in a strong way to achieve bigger opportunities, to be able to be in the foot in the door inside of rooms where decisions are being made, or to have conversations and partnerships with people. So instead of expressing camaraderie and suffering, instead of making that your goal, make your goal at least radical neutrality or genuine transparency in terms of how you are. The second common phrase is "per my last email," and the spoken equivalent of that is "as I said before." You know, you're in a meeting and you have been speaking and you've been sharing your thoughts, and then relayed to another person in that meeting, and they share their thoughts, and then it comes back to you with a question, and then you're reiterating and you say, "Well, as I said before," and then you say what you said before. Now, we use this phrase as a coping mechanism to kind of indicate to the other person that they didn't read our instructions or that they weren't listening to us. And in our minds, it's kind of like, "Hey, I gotcha, you weren't listening, gotcha, you weren't paying attention." But what this really communicates is destroying trust. It destroys trust because of the physics of signal entropy. In any transmission of the message, there's this signal-to-noise ratio, where noise interferes with the clear transmission of a signal. So when you wrap your message with sarcasm or with passive aggression, you're increasing the entropy of that signal, you're increasing the noise. And when you increase the noise, your listeners or your readers have to decode, they have to utilize a lot more energy to decode two things. Number one, they have to decode your message. What are you really trying to say? And number two, they have to decode your emotional interference. And as a result of that, that really increases the friction of a relationship, the entropy of a relationship. And in a business setting, in a leadership setting, when the entropy of a relationship is increased, then the available energy required to do useful work has decreased. And this is important because leaders value contributors and value other leaders who are able to decrease the noise and decrease the entropy of the whole system. So when you are wrapping your message in sarcasm and wrapping your message in common phrases that express frustration without owning direct confrontation, things like that, you're not only increasing the entropy, but you are conveying that you're someone who is prioritizing the need to be right. You're prioritizing your own needs, your own emotions, instead of looking at how that interferes with the signal and the flow of the whole system. The next common phrase is must be nice. This one is culturally common, but it really broadcasts something that's quite corrosive. It's entitlement mixed with a little bit of judgment. And what it implies is that someone else's success is either unearned or their circumstances has been unfairly privileged. For example, you see a colleague, they get to leave early, or their budget gets approved, and you look over and you go, gee, that must be nice. It reveals a deep-seated envy and also the belief that success is a zero-sum game. If you say it out loud, it can be easily interpreted that you are focused more on what other people are getting rather than what you're capable of creating. And if you say it to yourself instead of saying it out loud, then it's really building up a mindset that success is a zero-sum game. It's a scarcity mindset where you see that if someone else is able to achieve something, that there's less available for you. And that scarcity mindset, when carried forward into this environment, can be very dangerous because it really creates a kind of competition that destroys relationship equity. And even if you meant it casually, it still indicates social comparison and quiet resentment. And on one hand of the equation, right, it's very difficult to build partnerships with someone who's resentful of other people's wins, or at least appear to be resentful. And on the other hand, if you desire to be a high-value individual, then high-value individuals aren't triggered by other people's privileges or successes or achievements. And this is why, it's because they are instead focused on their own output and their own achievements. And the next common phrase is good luck with that. You see a new initiative being announced, especially one that you think will fail, and you kind of mutter to yourself under your breath, good luck with that. Sometimes this phrase is used as sarcasm to protest if we disagree on a decision that was made, right? Either way, it's organizational cynicism, which means that essentially you're positioning yourself as an observer, but you're betting on the failure of your own team. I mean, if the project fails, you get to say, I told you so. But if it succeeds, then you were wrong. And essentially, it's a lose-lose situation, which is the least sustainable situation to be in. Executives value optimistic realism. They need people who see the risks, but are committed to solving them. And the reason why is because business is not a spectator sport. If you are a spectator, watching and observing and taking pleasure in the shipwreck that comes, then you're not contributing to the solution. You're there to wait and see because you believe that because you're protesting silently and disagreeing with their decision and disagreeing with the project moving forward and creating for yourself a scenario where, well, good luck with that. It's your problem, not mine. Right. And in a business setting where teams are very important, solidarity and consolidation and collective intelligence, where all of these things combined move the system and create the flow, these are very important. This is why if you are not helping steer the ship, then you are dead weight. Sarcasm is often used as a coping mechanism, but it costs more than it gives. I like to call sarcasm the armor of the insecure. And insecure people are afraid of vulnerability. They can't handle being vulnerable. And when you care about the business, when you care about the project, if you care in general, you are vulnerable because You're vulnerable to people observing your decisions. You're vulnerable to criticism. You're vulnerable to people disagreeing with you. You're vulnerable to people having a different way of doing things and exposing your flaws. Like, there's a lot of vulnerability to caring. And if that triggers you, if that scares you or causes you anxiety, then our amygdala, the limbic system of our brain, our emotions, will cause us to reach for some sort of protective device. And unfortunately, a lot of times it is reaching out for sarcasm, the language we use to protect ourselves from that level of vulnerability. And I'll leave you with this. If you care about the work, then speak directly. If you see a problem, then offer a solution. If you feel frustration, then articulate the friction. There's ways of doing that without contempt and without powerlessness. Speak as though your words created reality, because they do.